Welcome to Answers Unleashed, a talk show to help you reshape your brain with science and faith to find the answers in front of you. Now, if you are listening, I want you to grab a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil, and I want you to tell me the answers to these particular equations. The first one is, what's 15% of 200? What is 15% of 200? All right. The next question is, what is 9 plus 6 divided by 3 times 2? Now, what is 9 plus 6 divided by 3 times 2? Now, if you do not know the answer to that, and if you froze up when you heard those math questions, guess what? You are like 9 out of 10 other Americans across the United States that more than likely has what I call a mathaphobia. Now, I'll ask you a little bit more about this on Answers Unleashed. This is a talk show to help you reshape your brain with science and faith so you find the answers in front of you. And we talk about all great subjects, and one of which is how we can reshape our brain to actually contain and learn everything that we need to know to be able to move forward in life. And oftentimes people, even adults, get stuck in mathematics. They will look at an equation, they'll try and calculate a percentage, and they'll freeze up. Has that ever happened to you? When you look at a mathematical equation and you kind of just freeze up, you'll sometimes have nervousness feeling. You'll start to sweat a little bit, perspire. You'll think to yourself, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do this. If that has ever happened to you, something is happening in your brain. 9 out of 10 Americans in the United States have a mathaphobia. And what a mathaphobia is a severe fear in the reptilian part of the brain that shuts off the frontal brain lobes. Let's break this down a little bit more. The reptilian part of the brain is what regulates the fight, flight, or freeze response in the middle of stress. For example, if you saw a tarantula walking across a table and you were scared of spiders, you would have one of three reactions. You would freeze up, not move. You would run to get away from it, or you would find the heaviest thing in the room to try and to kill it. I mean, that is the response that the reptilian brain has in us when we try to handle fear. Now, this is most fascinating because when the reptilian part of the brain fires off, it completely shuts down the frontal brain lobes. Someone who is trying to solve a problem can't solve it anytime that reptilian brain of that fear fires. So if you were trying to, let's say, figure out the right time to go to the dentist and schedule your appointment, if you saw a tarantula walking across the table, you would not be thinking about your dentist appointment, would you? You would be thinking about, oh my gosh, how am I going to get out of here? Or how am I going to not let it see me? Or how would I be able to squash it so it wouldn't get me? See, that's the phenomenon that happens in our brain. The reptilian part of the brain is excellent for us to be able to survive situations, to be able to get out alive. But it is not, I will repeat, it is not what we need when we are learning information, specifically when we're learning mathematics. And it's fascinating. Mathematics is the key, most fundamental subject that there is out there in the educational world that requires the frontal brain lobes to work. And let me explain what the frontal brain lobes do. The frontal brain lobes are responsible for us finding answers in our life. Now, there's no coincidence that this show is called Answers Unleashed. When I was a math professor and teaching, I'd be known to be able to find these answers. And mathematics allows us to find answers, and how it does that is it fires off it fires off the frontal brain lobes, and the frontal brain lobes are responsible for creative problem solving. There is no way to actually solve a math problem without using the frontal brain lobes. Here is the issue. When someone experiences fear, they cannot use their frontal brain lobe. And when someone is using their frontal brain lobes, they cannot experience fear. It's like an on or off switch. There is no way possible for someone to experience fear and to experience creative problem solving. So if someone has any type of fear happening in their brain, they cannot solve problems. Now let's look at it how this works with mathematics. If someone has a fear of solving problems in mathematics, that fear will trigger certain responses in your body. That fear will trigger an increased heart rate. That fear would trigger the panicky feeling. That fear would trigger that doubt in yourself on if you're doing it right. Am I doing this right? I'm not sure. And you second guess yourself and your confidence completely goes out the door. So in my book, I actually write all about this. It's in my book, Mathaphobia. And if you have a chance, go to mathaphobia.com. Go find it on amazon.com. Mathaphobia, find it at any local bookstore. Mathaphobia is a severe fear that shuts off the frontal brain lobes when someone is trying to solve mathematics. When someone is in the presence of fear, in that presence of being scared that they're not going to be able to solve the math problem correctly, the frontal brain lobe shut off completely, and someone is unable to find out what 15% of 200 is. They would be unable to calculate 9 plus 6 divided by 3 times 2 to know that the answer is 13. See, there's a lot of people that struggle with this, and it was including myself. Now, if you follow the program, you know that I launched rockets. I was thankful to be able to help great geniuses, fellow geniuses, launch rockets to space, 28 missions through NASA's Space Shuttle program, and I am so honored to have been a part of the program and to send astronauts into space and using mathematics and science to do that. And I won numerous awards, the modern day technology award winner for Engineer of the Year, and I was just so thankful for that. But many people do not realize that I struggled in math myself. I failed algebra, I failed geometry, failed calculus, and failed chemistry. I failed all of these subjects, and yet I became a rocket scientist. And many people, all my students in my classrooms as I teach as a math professor, always ask me that question. They say, "Oh, wait, how is that possible? You failed algebra, geometry, calculus, and chemistry, and you still launched rockets?" And the answer was yes. I had to understand that I was facing mathaphobia. And it was a teacher that sat down and helped me in my 11th grade year, Mr. Provencio. It would be great if I ever find out where Mr. Provencio is. He was such a great teacher. Well, if I ever get a chance, I would thank him because he sat next to me. And it was an interesting story. I kept up with math, and I kept taking it. Even though I failed it, I took it over in summer school and kept up with it, and I would still fail it, take it over in summer school. And I just kept up with it. My mother said that it was most important that I understand how to do mathematics and English because those are the subjects that were going to be around forever, she said. So I followed her advice. I didn't do necessarily well in math. And my professor sat next to me, and he said, I'm going to offer tutoring to everybody who wants to study for the AP Calculus test. And so if anyone wants to come, they're able to come, and I offer them complimentary tutoring over the winter session. So I thought everyone was going to come, and I wanted to do well on the test. So I caught the bus 2 hours each way just to sit with him for 1 hour. And no one else showed up. I was the only one. I scrunched up just enough money to catch the local bus system, $1.35 every single day, just to sit with him. And that was the best investment that I've ever made in my life. The investment of time, that bus ride, Because as I sat next to him, I realized that I was suffering from mathaphobia, a severe fear that crippled my thinking capacity. And as he sat there with me, showing me the information one by one, I would get it and then I wouldn't get it. Then I would get it, then I wouldn't get it. And then I'd go home, not get it, then I'd come back and realize I understood it. And it was that process of learning how to look at the mathematics, how my brain operated. Everyone has a different type of brain. And when we can understand that and address that and perceive that and educate people in that, that's when they understand how to do mathematics. And that's what Mr. Provencio did. He sat next to me and he showed me how to look at mathematics. And in that process, it was great. I was able to graduate from the school, and I eventually went to California State University, Northridge, where my first job was math tutoring, where I helped over a 5-year period, actually, to helping in group sessions over 10,000 people understand mathematics. And that process allowed me to understand mathematics deeply myself. Allowed me to graduate I'm so thankful. I graduated top 5 in a 6,500 graduating class, and I went later to work for the bowling company using this mathematics. But in that process of helping these 10,000 students, I recognized there were patterns that were happening with each people, and there were different types of mathaphobia. And the first type of mathaphobia is this: Quincy the Quitter. If you are Quincy the Quitter, you are a person who looks at a math book and you will feel overwhelmed. You will sit in the classroom and you'll look at the information. And if you can recall, when you did sit in the classroom, if you're graduated already, you would sit in the classroom and you look at the information and it would feel like it would go by and you didn't understand what was going on. And you hesitated raising your hand and asking a question because you thought that if you asked a question, everyone would think that you were dumb or stupid. That's probably more than likely what went through your brain. And these individuals, Quincy the Quitter, are overwhelmed when they go home to do their math homework, and then they will just not open the book. They'll do everything else because that feeling of not knowing how to do something is so frustrating that it just freezes them up. They may be good at sports or other things that are very active, but when it comes to mathematics, they just don't feel capable. The second type of fear of mathaphobia is this: Donna the overdoer. She'll try and try and try and do everything, and she'll try and memorize everything, and she'll try and do everything perfectly. And when she gets back her test, it is still not a passing grade. And she gets frustrated because she's good at everything else. She's good at writing. She's good at speaking. She's good at theater. She's good at all the other classes when she has to communicate. But when it comes to mathematics, she's just completely just frustrated because everything she tries to memorize doesn't work. The third type of fear in this mathaphobia, and these are all just these characters that we all have encountered, is Samuel the Struggler. If you're Samuel the Struggler, you are a person who is in this type of situation where you are so frustrated because you understand how to do the problem, but it's the teacher doesn't understand what you are communicating. And you will look at the board sometimes and it'll go too fast, or you'll try and write it down and the teacher's trying to, she or he is speaking just so fast you can't capture everything down. You need longer time to take the test and you understand how to do it, but you're not writing it the way the teacher wants it, and you become so frustrated because the teacher is not understanding what is in your brain and you are just angry. You're angry, you're in this situation, and you're angry that you can't get across your thoughts so someone could understand how you were looking at things. What you don't know is that if you're Samuel the Struggler, you're more than likely an Einstein in disguise. The last person is Crystal the Criticizer. She'll criticize and criticize everyone for all of her mistakes. She doesn't know how to become a beginner again. So if you're Crystal the Criticizer, you're looking at the board and you're thinking, I could learn this faster if I was looking at the book myself. I do not need to look at what the teacher is doing. It's just so frustrating. Or you will feel that you can go somewhere else and learn it better through a tutor or learn it better through some other method. Go to YouTube, go to all the different types of social media that's out there. And by the way, some of the social media out there, when they solve math problems, they're incorrect. Know that. Not everything online is correctly calculated. So if you're a Crystal the Criticizer, you're looking at this type of situation and you are thinking to yourself, I'm just so great at everything else but this, and I am going to find some way to be an expert at this, even if it's through my own means. So if you're thinking that way, more than likely you're suffering from a fear I call Crystal the Criticizer, part of Mathaphobia. Now, Mathaphobia actually stems from 3 different sources, and most people do not know this. The first type of source it stems from is from a parent. What I found out through my research in my book, and through the research of including that in my book, I realized that people who have had a parent who was scared of mathematics, fascinatingly so, passed it to their children. Let's just say it's Susan. Let's say Susan is a person who wasn't necessarily the best in mathematics when she was going to school, and she has a son. She's a single mom. She's raising her son, and he comes home with math work. Let's say it's some Common Core that's out there, or let's say it's math work that's not Common Core. It's some sort of other mathematical problem in which a teacher has shown. And you look at this math work and you try and help your son, and you can't. Then you feel very... You feel bad as a mom, because everything that you're doing, you just can't necessarily convey what the correct answer is because you don't know. So you say, oh, study your other work, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. But then you get busy, and that time never comes. And meanwhile, the son just goes through mathematics thinking that it's okay to focus on other stuff instead of the math. Well, that's the perfect example of how a parent unknowingly passes the math fear to a child. The second type of way that was most fascinating is that mathaphobia is spread through, get this, it's spread through teachers. It was fascinating. The Boston Globe earlier, several years ago, indicated that 75% of the new teachers in the Boston area failed the math certification tests to become first-time teachers. So these were teachers actually failing mathematics themselves, and they were not abreast of understanding the mathematics themselves. And so they more than likely struggled it. And what I found that when they were trying to learn the mathematics, and any time that they had this fear, it was contagious. They actually spread this fear to their students that they taught. And so most people don't know is that a lot of school systems do not have certified mathematicians or people with math degrees teaching mathematics. They have people that have taught history or English that are picking up math subjects and teaching them. And oftentimes this fundamental aspect of the mathematical teaching is lost. And the third way that people actually take up mathaphobia is from school systems. School systems themselves sometimes spread mathaphobia and the peers in the school system. It was fascinating. When the Olympics were happening in China, it was all over the news, and they were talking about all the different school systems that existed in China. And it was fascinating. It was mandatory for students in China to take algebra in the 8th grade and at least finish by calculus in finishing their education. But there is no such mandate here in the United States. And it was so fascinating because school systems do not necessarily require students to understand and take calculus by their last year. They are expected to take every single English course, but not mathematics. So I found out through all my research that there was a discrepancy in the educational requirements and expectations of people understanding mathematics here in the United States. Now, the reason why this is so critical is that the United States falls in the late 20th, I think it's 28th or 29th of all industrialized countries when it comes to mathematics and science education. I think this is out of 32 industrialized countries. If I look back at the numbers to verify that, I have to do that. But in any case, the United States fell so low when it came to mathematics and science. And the issue is that when we look at the computer systems and all the technology that is happening here in the United States and across the world, it requires mathematics and science to create it. Every single bit of the computer programming on all the social media sites, on the web, requires people to understand code and write that. The new literacy is mathematics. But do you understand it? The new literacy is the logic that's found in the math and science work, but the United States is falling very low. And so that brings us to, what do we do? If you're in one of these categories, how do you pull yourself out? And what I recognize is that when people are young, especially in the age range between 6 and 9, but most often it happens at the 8-year-old time mark, if someone is experiencing something very emotionally traumatic in their life, the first place that you find it is in their math education scores. If someone is going through something very difficult emotionally in their life, the first place you find it is in their mathematical scores. The reason behind this is that when someone is emotionally trying to figure out information, their left side and the right side of their brain do not communicate well with one another. And the left side, depending on the types of mathematics, is mainly responsible for calculations. Some of the right side, which deals with geometry, is included. But in any case, if the left and right side of the brain is not talking to one another, when someone tries to solve a math problem which requires both of the left and right side to actually work in unison together, they will struggle. And the first place where they have to solve a problem is mathematics. So if someone starts scoring poorly in mathematics, that is the first indication that something emotional is happening with your student and that you have the opportunity to clear out that toxic emotion to have a healthy feeling of confidence so they can move forward in their life. So what can you do? If you're in a situation with a mathaphobia mindset, if you have a child with a mathaphobia mindset, the first thing you do is, one, you have to find out which type of mathaphobia you have. Are you Quincy the Quitter? Are you Donna the Overdoer? Are you Samuel the Struggler? Are you Crystal the Criticizer? And there's actually a complimentary self-assessment, self-test that you can take on mathaphobia.com that will tell you which personality you are. And I do this, and I love doing this with my students when they are really struggling. They take the self-assessment test and they find out, oh my gosh, I was Donna the Overdoer. I was Samuel the Struggler. Most people in college are actually Donna the Overdoer. They are people that study and study, but they still miss the mark. What I found out is that a lot of people in high school are individuals who are Quincy the Quitter or Samuel the Struggler. They are never been taught the foundations of mathematics or how to communicate that, to write it. If they're Samuel the Struggler and they get frustrated, and then if they are Quincy the Quitter, there'll be individuals that are looking at this type of situation trying to figure out, okay, how do I even become not overwhelmed enough so I can open the book to do my homework? And what I found is that a lot of graduate students are actually Crystal the Criticizer. So these types of personalities and these fears come up so often that people need to know exactly which one they are. So the first step is you need to find out which fear that you have battled with. And then the second step is you've got to reject it. You've got to reject the fear. So once you find out the fear, you've got to reject it. And the way that you reject it is you recognize who you can become in lieu of that. If you're Quincy the Quitter, you actually, through taking steps, can become David the Determined. If you are Donna the Overdoer, guess what? Through taking the right steps and reprogramming your brain, you actually become Sarah the Strategist. If you are Samuel the struggler through the right steps, you become Ivan the innovator. And lastly, Crystal, who criticizes everybody, can become Ellen the explorer. So now that you will be able to know that there is a new type of personality that exists that completely uses the frontal brain lobes, how do you build that? And it was fascinating how the brain works is that you have to remove a fear or remove an energy or remove a thought and replace it with a new belief. And when you do that, that actually merges your brain, surprisingly enough, and it tells your brain, okay, start operating in unison. So the way that you do this, if you are, let's say, Quincy the Quitter, and I love this. This is actually in my book, and it's actually in chapter 6. If you're Quincy the Quitter, the first thing you have to do is you have to reprogram your brain with different thoughts. If you're thinking, okay, I'm never going to understand this math, you've got to think the way that David, the determined, would think. He would think, I will understand parts of this math. It won't be everything. And eventually, I'll understand most of the concepts. Quincy would think, he would think dysfunctionally, I'm not that smart at this. But David reprograms, when I'm determined, I can understand anything. Quincy may think, no one will want to help me understand it. But David, on the other hand, thinks there will be someone who is willing to help me, but I'm going to be the one to find them. And so there's this way of reprogramming your brain to do this. And then David also has affirmations every day. I will be acknowledged. Every challenge I face, I'm going to succeed it. Every day I will become stronger at this mathematics, and moment by moment, I'll be determined to succeed. And each exercise I do, I'll know a little bit more. So there's that process of reprogramming your brain, but next you actually have to take action steps. Now, action steps are the way that your brain actually builds tissue, neurons in your brain. And by you actually carrying out an action that is associated with a new belief system in your brain actually then is able to reshape itself to be able to house mathematical problems. So, for example, if you are Quincy the Quitter, you would, let's say, find out how to find someone who is willing to help you understand mathematics. So you would actually go out, find someone. You would have people who reject you. They would say, okay, no, I'm busy. You would say, can you help me with this problem? And they say, no, I really don't understand it. Or you go, oh, are you interested to go in a study group? And some people will say, no, I'm busy at the time. But let's say there is a tutor in the math department that you go to who is able to help you. You then, by finding someone who is willing to help you, then have reshaped your brain. Even though you haven't even started a math problem, the fact that you've gone through to find someone to help you did most of the work for you. There's more steps like this. For example, in the chapter 7 of the book, I talk about Donna, the overdoer, who becomes Sarah the strategist. And so she's a person, Sarah the strategist is a person who realizes that she doesn't have to overthink things, and she doesn't have to think about every single detail about the situation. She doesn't have to overload herself with memorizing things and if-then scenarios, but she steps back and looks at the big picture. And when she looks at the big picture, she's able to understand a strategy. She doesn't have to focus on everything, but just a couple of things that once she focuses on that, everything else will fall into place. So, for example, if Donna realizes that she has an issue and she wants to become Sarah the strategist, she'll reprogram her brain by certain thoughts. Let's say, for example, if Donna is thinking, I can't memorize all these formulas. I have no idea when to use these formulas. Sarah would reprogram, I will choose to know the key formulas and how they're commonly used. And I will be able to solve these problems with my accumulated knowledge. Donna, who may think dysfunctionally, may think, oh my God, I must impress the teacher. That's the only way I'm going to be able to get an A. Well, Sarah is someone who has a different belief system. She'll think, I will answer the question that's asked of me to my best ability. Donna may think, oh, I may be smarter in English, writing, and other creative subjects, but I may not be able to do well in this mathematics. Sarah has a completely different mindset. Sarah will, with strategic effort, think, I can be just as brilliant in math as I am in English and other subjects, but I'm going to find out the strategy to do it. That's the difference. When people have a different belief system, that's when their entire brain reshapes. So Sarah is a person who is solving problems. She'll say these things to herself every single day to completely reprogram her mind. She'll say, I will accept the advice given by the math experts. I will follow what the other students are doing in mathematics, and I'll create my own success plan. She's a person who is independent. But most importantly, she will take also action in solving her problems. She'll have actually a war on distraction. She'll actually take through an action step a process where she will recognize what is distracting her so it won't anymore. For example, if she's at home and she's trying to study mathematics and she's trying to study, but she realizes that the refrigerator's there and she can go in and distract herself with, let's say, ice cream or some cookies, or let's say that there is laundry that needs to be done. She'll find every reason in the book not to sit down and study mathematics. But so she will take a war in that distraction. She'll go, all right, if I'm at home studying this mathematics, I may be so distracted, I'm going to go to the library and do my homework there, or I'm going to go and study with a math tutor. That way, the only thing I can focus on is the math, and I'll set a time period. I'll set 2 hours, and in that 2-hour time period, I'll get assistance in knowing exactly the key process of the parts that I don't understand. That's where she takes ownership, and by the act of her going over to the new location to have a war on distraction, that's just one way that she reprograms her brain. Now, if you're our Samuel the Struggler, do you know that you're a brilliant Einstein in disguise? It was fascinating. Einstein was a person who struggled This is so fascinating when I read about Einstein and learned about what he was doing. Einstein is a person who was not the smartest out of his group. And he actually struggled to be able to communicate himself with other people. He was so brilliant that it was difficult. He faced problems when he tried to tell other people what was happening in his brain and what he was seeing with energy and how it relates to light and mass, that nobody was understanding him. And so he actually got together with the other group of people in what he called his Saturday Academy, known as the Olympia Academy. He met with people every single Saturday in the Olympia Academy. I can't even make this up. And in this Olympia Academy, he had individuals he would go to ask, how do I explain this? What do I do? Is this right? And these individuals, who were far smarter than he was able to guide him on how to communicate himself with the average public so everyone could receive his ideas on the general theory of relativity. He was the only one in the Olympia Academy who was willing to get out there with the entire mass public to show them the concepts of science and making science sexy. No one else was willing to do that, but he had to overcome the way that he saw himself in that role. He had to look at himself as the communicator, the person who was going to not only understand how his own brain worked, but he had to understand the way other people's brain worked so he could describe new concepts to them so they could completely receive it. So that process of completely receiving this was just so brilliant in understanding how he could communicate that to other people that it transformed his complete way of being. So in this process, if you are Samuel, you have to know that you are a brilliant Einstein. So if you are a person with a learning disability or categorized with that, if you're a person with attention deficit disorder, if you're a person categorized with that, Guess what? You are Samuel the Struggler, about to become Ivan the Innovator. You see things in such a way that is so different than everyone else. Your job is to completely understand how your brain works so you can communicate yourself in the way so people can understand the brilliance that you bring to the world. You're Ivan the Innovator. You create things and see things that other people don't get. But your job is to learn how people communicate. And the best way to do that is to communicate with yourself. And there's different ways to do that. You have to know exactly what you put into your system. I found out that people who are Samuel the Strugglers typically are set off by the wrong foods that they eat. They are very sensitive. And once they find out the right things that agree with their system, that's when they become mentally focused. For example, I am allergic to wheat and anything with gluten. Anytime I would have that in my system, I would completely go haywire and I wouldn't be able to see any math problems or do any math problems. And as soon as I took wheat and sugar out of my diet, I could think clearly. And there's other techniques that I share in the book. And lastly, if you are Crystal, the criticizer, you are a person who has been placed in situations where you seem to have always been able to handle everything and take care of everything. But when you are faced with a situation where you become a beginner again, it gets very frustrating. So you're a person that has to learn how to become a beginner again. You're a person who has to realize that you don't know everything, but it's okay to ask. It's okay to sit there. It's okay to learn. It's okay to not know how to do something and feel okay about it. And the biggest challenge for you is to trust someone else in how they show you. Once you trust someone else, and realize that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to not know things. And it's okay to move forward. Guess what? You're reprogramming your brain. So Crystal may think, I can do this math better than the class explanation. Ellen, the explorer, would say, I wonder how my explanation relates to the teacher's talk. How are they similar? Crystal may think, I can learn the subject better from a tutor and not the teacher. But Ellen would think, my tutor will help me understand the way the teacher shows me. And so with Ellen's daily affirmations where I can ask for help and still be respected, and I will choose to be thankful and happy despite any past fear, and I will enjoy my time in learning and becoming a beginner, she's actually reprogramming her brain with different beliefs, and she's allowing herself to take a new approach, decide to trust, allow there to be new beginnings, and most importantly, she will see the world from a different point of view. Now, I am so thankful. There are more tips out there for Mathaphobia. If you have a chance, pick up Mathaphobia. In it, I talk about not only all these characters, but how to use your Myers-Briggs personality type to learn mathematics, and how teachers and parents and educators can change the way in which they are helping their students to understand mathematics. And I am just so happy to share all of this wonderful information with you here on Answers Unleashed. Again, I am so happy. Tune into us every Wednesday on kpcradio.com to listen to more shows. Next week, we have a great guest, and you'll find it on the website. Go to AnswersUnleashed.com, where you can find out more information about what's happening. Call our hotline, 888-88-ANSWERS, to find out more about what is happening with the show. And again, I am here with you on Answers Unleashed, where we reshape your brain with science and faith to find the answers in front of you. I'll see you next time.